Welcome back to another one of my videos showing you guys how to free yourself from the system. In today's video, I will be discussing your public trust, and I will be breaking down your Cesta KV trust and how you can gain access to it. Now, please do not be misled with all the information floating around on the internet that's telling you that you can discharge debt without being secured party. You cannot. Please do not be misled by all the information floating around on the internet that's telling you that once you access your Cesta KV trust that you have $100 million just waiting for you. That is also misleading. So in this slideshow, I will break down everything that you need to know and what steps you need to take to access your Cesta KV trust successfully. One very important thing to know is that people create governments to serve, not rule. A people's constitutional government is, by definition, a public trust instituted to serve private sovereign people in the common law jurisdiction. So the way that we're living is completely upside down, and the pyramid that they show you where it has the middle class, upper class, lower class, that class pyramid is incorrect. We are supposed to be the majority because we are the people. So the pyramid is supposed to be turned upside down, where the biggest part is at the top and the smallest part is at the bottom. They are our subcontractors, and they are subcontracted to operate on this land because we allow them to. But they have actually reversed roles, and they are telling us what to do when it's supposed to be the other way around. The facts. A trust is formed automatically in law whenever a property interest is divided. Sovereign people form a public trust when they institute a constitutional government. Such a sovereign government is an unincorporated common law assembly or a body politic, not an incorporated body corporate. The sovereign people place their trust in the governance skills of their elected representatives, who are elected into office, not into power. Your representative goes in your place. The sovereign people are the employers of their representatives and all government employees. Without exception, the employees of this public trust are public servants, working for the private sovereign people, who are the free men and women of the nation. Everyone in government service, from your head of state to the lowest employee, derives their limited authority from the private sovereign people, and each such public servant has a fiduciary duty to serve as a trustee for the private sovereign people, who are the beneficiaries of their public trust. Sovereignty resides in the people, whose power is the source of law. Your government is public, employing numerous public officers, each of whom swear an oath of allegiance according to law, for example, as prescribed in the New Zealand Oaths and Declaration Act of 1957. Your head of state is your principal trustee in the law of the land, the de jure common law. In New Zealand, the common law is acknowledged in the Imperial Laws Applications Act of 1988. After the commencement of this act, the law of England, including the principles and rules of equity, so far as it was part of the laws of New Zealand, immediately before the commencement of this act, shall continue to be part of the laws of New Zealand. It is sworn duty of all public officers to uphold the common law embodied in the private sovereign people. This goes for New Zealand, United States, United Kingdom. Anywhere where there is common law jurisdiction over the people, you are under Admiralty Maritime Jurisdiction, which means that you have to reclaim your sovereignty because currently you are not sovereign. More details. If the people's sovereign authority, partly delegated to their government, is turned against the sovereign people, the public trust is betrayed. Sadly, centuries of systematic monetary, legal, and political corruption have deeply subverted our government, which has been incorporated to serve the debt money system of bondage, extracting wealth for a global power elite who rule at the expense of the majority. Nevertheless, the foundation of our government is the public trust, over which the people are the sovereign power of the nation. Every governmental entity, unincorporated or incorporated, is subordinate to the authority of every sovereign man or woman and to the sovereign people of every community, for all government, however formed, are subject to their creators or simply to the will of the people whose consent they require to exist. The beginning of freedom is the realization that your public trust is there to serve your life, not take it. The power of your life is found in your self-awareness, for we intuitively know that no other man or woman was born as our master. Sovereignty is your right in natural law, but it is not given, it is exercised, and it is not held by attention to your unalienable rights. The paramount responsibility of those people who benefit from their constitutional governance is its maintenance by any reasonable means that upholds its founding principles. It is not the function of our government to keep the citizen from falling into error. It is the function of the citizen to keep the government from falling into error. And that comes from American Communications Association versus Dowds, 339 U.S. 38 442 in 1950. Go look that up for reference. Now let's talk a little bit about the public servants. Public servants serve the private sovereigns who, having founded a constitutional unincorporated government for the benefit of the people, are governed by their consent. Your government is a public institution with public servant employees who serve in a public capacity, whereas the people who form governments are private people living in their private capacity. If you don't know the difference between public and private, go check out my video breaking that down so that this can make more sense to you. Even if you already watched that video, I would suggest you go watch it again after watching this, because this information is going to take a while for you to process, and it makes sense for you to listen to it as much as you can so that you can fully comprehend why we are in this boat and how to get out of it. Public servants serve the private people who, having instituted a freely elected representative government for the benefit of the people, are governed by their consent. All elected officials and or employees of the public state are public servants, including peace officers, police officers, policy officers. The founding of a representative government by the people automatically forms a trust in common law, with the people as beneficiaries and their public servants as trustees that hold the fiduciary duty. The public servants have a fiduciary duty to serve the beneficiaries of the trust. And when you are the trustee, that means that you have to do what benefits the beneficiary. So you have to make decisions that benefit the beneficiary. But the public servants of today do not do that. Every decision that they make for us does not benefit us, and it causes us to pay fines, citations, and other stuff that causes us to pay that money to be labor slaves. It is the responsibility of the private people to oversee their trust and their public servant employees for the common good of their common communities and nations. The government of a sovereign nation is an unincorporated body politic, which, enabled by the delegated power of the people, can create subordinate legal fiction governmental corporations and non-governmental corporations for the purpose of commerce. Sovereign living people are in the common law jurisdiction. The national law of land, which is lawful, while legally generated corporate artificial persons created by the state, are in admiralty maritime commercial jurisdiction, the international law of the sea, which is legal. So that's the difference between legal and lawful. Lawful is sovereign, legal is under their jurisdiction. The common law mirrors natural law, inasmuch as the protection of life is paramount, because life is a sacred creation. Natural law is a system of rights or justice held to be common to all humans and derived from nature rather than from the rules of society. More on public servants. So let's break this down. So we're going to start at the beginning. Whereas the legal fiction system of commerce is simply an imaginary construct using artificial persons as transmitting utilities to extract and exchange productive energy from the real world, hence the maxim of law, legality is not reality. Jurisdiction is critical because when a man or woman acts in the role of an artificial person, they are subservient to the state which created it by registration. The state prescribes revocable privileges and benefits to its persons, whereas private men and women possess unalienable rights and properties. Moreover, artificial persons in all corporations are created as debtors by default, having no creative human energy or innate productive capacity, and therefore they can be bankrupted. This is why your government has been incorporated and why you are using debt money instead of sovereign money issued debt-free by a sovereign and unincorporated government. When a nation or community surrenders its sovereign power to create money without debt or interest, a deadly economy is inevitable due to the cumulative toxic consequences of interest-bearing debt. Finally, the system is mathematically guaranteed to collapse because the interest, which is not created, compounds exponentially, requiring ever more new debt to service existing debt. More info. There are no limits to the growth of debt, and yet all debt is sooner or later a future claim on nature as the ultimate limited source of all wealth. Servicing debt requires extracting production at any cost beyond the limits to growth on our finite planet. The growth imperative to service endless debt causes overall a destructive economy, giving the parasitic nature of debtism. It should be obvious why the private people are not taught to uphold their common law jurisdiction, which acknowledges their sovereign rights already existing, antecedent to the state. The sovereign people of any nation have a duty to oversee their governmental public servants, failing which the sovereign people despise their inherent authority will sooner or later suffer the consequences of their negligence. Because history teaches us that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. When private people wish to exercise their sovereign authority over their public servants, unincorporated and incorporated, they must have common law standing. That is what I'm here for, to give you guys an understanding, or should I say a comprehension, as to why this process is so necessary and as to why we need to regain and reclaim our sovereignty, because we were naturally and innately born with it. It was not something that had to be given to us from a government or any created legal fictitious entity. Conditional acceptance. Every man or woman in every community of private people can uphold the common law, declining consent if they deem it necessary to avoid harm or loss at any living soul. To any living soul, or to safeguard their community, or to protect their living earth upon which all people depend for life. A private man or woman can rebut a presentment from a public servant and hold them to account by using a process of conditional acceptance. Or a community of private people can rebut a decision, a plan, or a policy of their public servants by holding a people's assembly in order to exercise their home rule powers. Peace officers. Your public servants include all oath-bound officers of the law. Most frontline police officers, however, perform two roles. As a peace officer, they uphold the law, discharging their impartial duties under oath according to law, which is the de jure common law jurisdiction, also known as the law of the land. They swear to keep the peace by doing their best to keep people and their property safe from harm. They are protected by a public bond having limited liability. They have common law powers, constitutional, delegated by the people. As policy officers, they enforce statutes, which prescribe the legal terms and conditions of contracts with penalties, etc. In the de facto Admiralty Maritime Jurisdiction, also known as the law of the sea, they do not swear an oath to enforce statutes in commerce and are not protected by a public bond having unlimited full commercial liability. They have corporate powers, which are contractual, which are subject to consent. You must consent first. This is why when they arrest you, they have to get you to give away your jurisdiction before they are able to do that. During a traffic stop, they have to ask you questions, and certain questions that they ask you get you to sneakily give away your jurisdiction so that they can then stand over you. This is why they ask you, do you understand? Because that means that they stand over you when you consent to it. Once you consent to their standing over you, then they go through the process of enforcing policy to keep you in the artificial person, which can then be taxed or fined, cited, any of those things, arrested, because it all is a way to siphon money, or should I say debt money, from a transmitting energy or transmitting utility as a debt slave. More on peace officers. Now let's look at this little chart right here. A peace officer equals constabulary powers, which equals constitutional. Now that is what their true oath is to uphold. They take the oath to uphold the peace officer part of it. And the policy officer part of it is a corporate power, and it is contractual. That comes in when they are under a corporation, when they are incorporated. Unincorporated, they are peace officers. Incorporated, they are policy officers. So they hold a dual role without you knowing. Revenue gathering for Your Nation, Inc. in the Admiralty Maritime Jurisdiction is not part of a sworn duty of a peace officer/constable. An officer conducting legal fiction commerce in support of a private debt money system of bondage can be described as a private mercenary abdicating their oath. Police officers enforcing statutes in legal fiction commerce have no jurisdiction over any living man or woman unless that man or woman consents to that jurisdiction, as I said before. All legal jurisdiction over a man or woman requires their consent, and so all presentments from a police officer are a service offered by consent. The police cannot stop you, question you, detain you, arrest you, search you, or charge you without your consent if there is no victim. There has to be an injured party for them to be able to do that. Ultimately, the administrative courts cannot fine you or imprison you without your consent. This is why you're able to get traffic tickets dismissed from a letter enforcing your rights, because you don't consent to that contract. This is why you sign traffic citations with UCC 1-308, because you're letting them know that that does not belong to me. I am acting as a legal fiction, and I am passing that back to you guys for you to discharge it. You know what you got to do with that fine. It doesn't belong to me. I'm using commercial code against you. But if at any point you understand, which is stand under their authority, as I said before, agree to anything or give them the artificial legal person name, you are consenting. So when they say, what is your name, and you provide them with that name, you are then acting as the fictional entity, the corpse, the ens legis. Now let's take a look over here at this chart as I break it down. I'm gonna put it big on the screen so you guys can see and follow along. Now let's focus on the blue side of this chart, where it's talking about the policy officer, which is the police officer side of their dual responsibility that we don't know about. So this is them under Admiralty Maritime Commercial Jurisdiction, which is the law of the sea. They are incorporated office. They are corporate powers, which is contractual and subject to consent. They are private contractors with no public oath of office and bond, which means they are acting as public when they are actually a private, which is illegal when it comes to what they're doing. Officer breaching de jure public oath is in dishonor. They are in a private capacity, which means they hold full commercial liability. This is why you can hold them accountable when they do incorrect things or wrong things. They are law enforcement officers collecting revenue, performing commerce, enforcing statutory contracts of the corporation, by the corporation, for the corporation. The officer must establish that you are acting in the role of an artificial legal person, which is consent by joinder, in order to exercise jurisdiction over you. This is why they ask what your name is. When you identify with that name, then you are acting as a role in joinder. Only a legal person corporation can be taken to court for an offense unless there is an injured party, which most times there are not. And penalties are statutory for the legal person, so they do not apply to living men or women, because this is de facto, which means in practice. Now let's look over at the yellow part of this chart, where it's the peace officer, the constable part, the part that they are actually supposed to be upholding, that they have an oath to. This is common law, which is the people's jurisdiction, the law of the land, non-incorporated office. Constabulary powers, which is constitutional, because they are delegated by the people. They are public servants with public oath of office and bond. Officers upholding de jure public oath is an honor. They are of the public capacity, which means they hold limited liability. They are peace officers. They are constables, which means they keep the peace, uphold justice, and serve and protect the people, of the people, by the people, for the people. The officer must have probable cause of an articulable, reasonable suspicion that you are committing or about to commit a crime of harm to a living soul, and that alone, or their property. While a living soul, you are in common law obliged not to cause harm to any living souls or their property. Only if there is a victim of a crime can an officer establish jurisdiction over you, and those are the only two: when you are harming someone or their property. Crime Act 1961, Section 9, no one shall be convicted by any offense at common law, because it's de jure, which means in law. It is lawful, not legal. The two basic types of encounters. Let's go over this really quick. And let's really break this down. So number 1 is consensual, in which you are free to leave at any time. And number 2 is detention, seizure, arrest, in which you are held by an assertion of authority or by physical restraint against your will. In any detention, seizure, arrest, the peace officer / constable must have probable cause and or a reasonable suspicion that you are committing or about to commit a crime against a victim. The accuser bears the burden of proof to reasonably establish your crime. In any detention, seizure, arrest, the police officer must establish that you are acting in joinder to an artificial legal person, name created by the state and controlled by prescribed statutes. The officer bears the burden of establishing your informed and voluntary consent. No police officer is vested with the common law power, which is constabulary power, to randomly detain or arrest you for the purpose of asking questions. That is illegal. Police officers have no power whatever to arrest or detain a citizen for the purpose of questioning him or of facilitating their investigations. It matters not at all whether the questioning or the investigation is for the purpose of enabling them to ascertain whether he is the person guilty of a crime known to have been committed, or is for the purpose of enabling them to discover whether a crime has or has not been committed. If the police do so act in purported exercise of such a power, their conduct is not only destructive of civil liberties, but it is unlawful. And this comes from Virginia v. Banner, 1970, VR 240 at page 249. And this comes from the full bench of Northern Territory Supreme Court. Go look that up for reference as well. It is an ancient principle of the common law that a person not under arrest has no obligation to stop for police or answer their questions, and there is no statute that removes that right. The conferring of such a power on a police officer would be a substantial distraction from the fundamental freedoms which have been guaranteed to the citizen by common law for centuries. Judge Stephen Kay from Melbourne Supreme Court said this on November 25, 2011. There is no common law power vested in police giving them the unfettered right to stop or detain a person and seek identification details. Nor is S59 of the Road Safety Act of statutory source of such power. This comes from the magistrate Duncan Reynolds in Melbourne, Australia, from July 2013. An officer who stops you in the course of your lawful business without your consent or articulatable probable cause is assailing you. So 1, you're going to identify your assailant, their motive, and jurisdiction. Keep in mind that it is always to get jurisdiction over you so that they can get you to admit to acting as the legal person so that you can create joinder. Number 2, you're going to verify, or you're going to require verification of the crime, because if there's no crime, there is no jurisdiction. And most of all, be polite, stay on point, and stay silent. Enforce your right to remain silent. You have the right not to be arbitrarily stopped, detained, or arrested by chance, whim, or impulse. There must be an articulable or reasonable suspicion that you are involved in a crime against a victim, and a witness, and it can be a peace officer with first-hand knowledge and evidence, who is willing to write an affidavit under penalty of perjury and full commercial liability, making the accusation of the crime. You have the right not to answer questions, and you have the right not to provide government-issued ID. You have the right to ask questions. That is your right, just like you have the right to due process. Now, this is the constable's oath for constables in New Zealand, but the one in America is pretty similar. Now, the constable's oath has a lot to do with what they take when they're on the peace officer side of it. But to control people, the police rely on the statement, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So let me briefly just go over the constable's oath. They name themselves and they swear that they will faithfully and diligently serve His or Her Majesty, specifically the name of the reigning sovereign, queen or king of New Zealand, her or his heirs and successors, without favor or affection, malice, or ill will. While a constable, they will, to the best of their power, keep the peace and prevent offenses against the peace, and will, to the best of their skill and knowledge, perform all the duties of the office of constable according to the law, so help them God. A police employee becomes a constable peace officer by taking the constable's oath. A constable is vested with constabulary powers delegated by the people to keep the peace, by making decisions that reasonably keep people and their private property safe from harm. The oath is to Her or His Majesty, Queen or King of New Zealand, because the head of state is the principal trustee and public servant of the sovereign people and the embodiment of traditional common law. And some brief words of advice directly from me is to educate yourself, ask questions, and verify everything. Don't just take someone's word. Actually go and do the work and really go see if what they say is true. Fact check everything, because no one's going to provide the information to you like you. Although I'm helping you with giving you this information and pointing you in the right direction to free yourself, you still must do your own due diligence to make sure that everything that I'm giving you checks out, and to make sure that you fully comprehend any of the things that I'm saying before you go and try to execute anything. Keep in mind that if you want something, you have to work for it, and that there is no shortcuts to success. So if you want to make it somewhere in life, you have to put in work. There is no way that you're going to just want something and it's going to pop into your lap without a blueprint or steps to follow to take you to that successful place that you want to be. And last but not least, thank you for spending your time with me and actually watching this slideshow to the end. This information is very important for you to free yourself from this system that you are unaware that you are even in. If you want to learn every step needed to free yourself, please consider joining my private community where you can work independently with all the information needed at patreon.com/divine trust babies. Or if you're one of those people who need a little bit more support and a little bit more structure, maybe consider joining my DTB Academy for Every Step to Freedom at divine-trust-babies.trainercentralsite.com/course/divine trust babies academy. Or if you want to do things on your own and you like the way that I teach and you're interested in any of my courses and content, you can purchase my courses and content at linktr.ee/divine trust babies, where you can purchase all of my content from the complete secured party process, how to do a UCC financing statement, how to get food stamps, so many different things that I teach people and have been successful with helping many people in my private community to be successful with. So if you like the way that I teach, you like the way that I present information, and you like just me as a person, please consider joining my private community, my academy, or purchasing my content. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, share, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can be notified whenever I post a video to help you along your path and journey to freedom. Much abundance.